Cancer. And we're delighted to have Dr. Vijay Sangha with us, one of the leading urologists at Christie's, but also doing lots of national and I believe international work. And also Mr. Lieber Hughes, who is, an ambassador for Prostate Cancer UK, but also one of Carl's session on prostate cancer. Right. So welcome. I mean, for those who don't know the Caribbean African Health Network, we've been going for just over 3 years now. Could I encourage people to mute their mics so that we don't have any distractions? We've been going for over 3 years now, and at the start of the pandemic, we thought it would be good to bring our community together. Just like every other organization, we've had to adapt the way we do things, and we've moved so much online, but it means that we've had greater reach, and we've been able to galvanize the community, which is amazing. So tonight, we're hoping that you'll find this session really useful. Since the beginning of May, we've been running a health hour sessions on Saturday mornings between 11 and 12, where we have medical professionals, so GPs, consultant gynecologists, orthopedic surgeon and others coming on the, call, engaging with the community, offering, free consultation, but also responding to queries. I think COVID is, something scary, but we've done a lot to bring professionals to the community and to offer that reassurance. For those of you who've been following closely our work, 2 years ago, we had, VJ coming to present at our office premises, in the hall over there. It was well attended. And, since then, he's been a real supporter of the work of Khan. And, he comes along to our galas. He supports us and he puts the word out there. He gives raffles when we do our galas. So we're really grateful he's been able to set aside some time for tonight. And Liebert as well, he's been volunteering, for Khan, and now in a role as a paid counselor, offering bereavement support, but also mental and emotional health. So at this point in time, I'm going to hand over to, VJ. This session is being recorded, so that it becomes a resource. We also live streaming on YouTube, so we have people connecting over there as well. And, it will be on our YouTube channel as a resource. So, that's just, throughout the session, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat box. You can send it privately to Elizabeth, myself, or any of the co-hosts. And, your questions will be answered. We'll do our very best. But at this point in time, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Vijay Sangha to do his presentation.
Hi, Charles. Thank you so much for the invitation once again. It's always a great pleasure to come and speak to your community. I'm going to just spend a few seconds trying to make sure I can share this screen, so bear with me. Okay, is everybody able to see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Right, so I gave a very similar talk to this 2 years ago for Khan, and I am sorry to say that nothing has really changed, and that you will probably find out over the next few months from our more recent national prostate cancer audit that the conditions for the Caribbean and African community when it comes to prostate cancer is still in need of a great improvement. And I think that's a political and a community thing, and I think it has to come from both sides. So we're supported by lots of people at the Christie, including Khan. We're probably one of the biggest prostate cancer centres in the United Kingdom, and are heavily involved in the research.
It's really looking at the personal.
Could I just ask people to switch their mics on mute? Great, thank you so much. At present, the amount of research being undertaken in... Could people switch their mics on mute, because it's quite off-putting, please? Thank you. So when it comes to research in prostate cancer in the African and Caribbean community, in this country, there's not so much that happens. There was a small team in Bristol that did a small local study, and basically it came back showing figures very similar to what I'm going to show you today. So for all those people that are not sure about prostate cancer, I know that some of you are well read in this, having looked at it yourself, but also having been to my talks before. But prostate cancer, prostate only exists in men. It sits at the bottom of the bladder, and when you pass your urine, the water passage goes through the middle of the prostate, and you can see it just here. So this is the prostate gland, and this is the bladder. This is a more closer up picture. So you can see when you pass the urine, it goes through the water passage like so. As you get older, and this happens in all men, the prostate grows, and that's a normal process of aging. But what can happen is that the growth of the prostate results in narrowing of the water passage, which means that as you get older, it becomes more and more difficult to pass your urine. If we look at the risk of prostate cancer, we know that as we get older, and this is in all ethnic groups, as we get older, the risk of getting prostate cancer increases. So most of the time, the prostate grows as we get older. It is because of non-cancer, but in a small percentage of people, it will be due to cancer. And you'll see here that at the age of 50 to 60, the risk is up to 2%, but as we get older, the risks increase further. So when you're in your 80s, the risk of developing cancer is well into double figures. When we look at prostate cancer, we look at something called a T-score. That T-score tells us how advanced the cancer is, and that score goes from 1 through to 4. If you are at 1 and 2, it means that the disease is localized to the prostate, but if you're at 3 or 4, it means that it's more advanced and has gone beyond the confines of the prostate gland. One of the things that we look at in prostate cancer is whether it spreads. So it doesn't only spread outside the confines of the gland itself, but it can spread to the glands which lie to the edge of the pelvis, but it can also spread to the bone. And when it does those kind of things, we say that it's metastatic, which means it is spread beyond the ability for us to cure it. So I just want to show you some figures from the United Kingdom. This is the process cohort, which is a study that was done by multiple centres in this country. And what I want you to concentrate on is where I've drawn the red line. If you look underneath it, this column here is for white people. This is all black people, and then it's separated into Caribbean and black African. Now, if you look at the third column here, this tells you the number of men per 100,000 that are likely to get prostate cancer. And you'll see that in white people, by the age of 50, it's 23. If you look in black people overall, you'll see that by the time you're in your mid-50s, the risk is almost 4 times. So it's 84 per 100,000. And in the older group, again, it's much greater. But you'll see the vast difference between white and black populations. If you get into the age groups that are beyond that, you'll see that the figures in the white population go into triple figures. So you're looking at 200 to 500 people per 100,000 population. That's between the ages of 60 and 80. But in the black population, you see that the figures are 4 numbers. So you're going well over 1,000. What we're interested in is trying to reduce these figures somehow. So this is an easier diagram to look at. So this tells you the number of, this is American data, so this tells you the number of people per 100,000 that have had prostate cancer as the years have gone by. So the top red line is the incidence for Black people, and the lines underneath that are for white, Asian, and Hispanics. But you'll see that there's a big gap between this red line and the others. And then although the numbers have been going down, there's still a vast difference there. And the same goes for people that die from prostate cancer. So whilst the numbers have been going down slowly, the difference between these ethnic groups is quite vast. So just to remind you of the different types of prostate cancer when it comes to T-staging, what I want to show you now is how the difference between white and African American individuals is. So you will see from this data, and I think I want you to concentrate on this top line. So non-localized means that the cancer has spread beyond the prostate, and you will see that there's a 60% of the population in African Americans had advanced disease, but only 40% in the white population. So this is almost 2 times the risk. So we're not only saying that prostate cancer is 2 to 3 times more likely to occur in Black populations, but you're 2 times more likely to get advanced disease. So what are the risk factors? So these risk factors speak for themselves. I'm not going to read them out, but these are the risk factors in all populations. But we know that if you're in Black populations, then your risk is much greater. I think family history is important. So if you have more than 3 people who are first-degree relatives who have had prostate cancer, then the risks of your subsequent generations and your current relatives is significantly greater as well. So in that population, in those groups of people, we would recommend much earlier detection. So to get to the GP or your specialist around the age of 40 to 45 to have your PSA checked. One of the important things, and one of my kind of pet kind of areas of medicine is actually obesity. So we know that if you have a rotund belly, so a belly that pokes out lots, then your risk of cancer in general is much greater. So whilst your weight can be very good, you can still have a large belly, and that's quite common in Black populations. It's common in Asian populations as well, and it's important that you keep your waist size, and this is your waist measured at your belly button, should be less than 39 inches. So this is not the waist measurement underneath your belly, it's the waist measurement on your belly. Right. So what makes it more likely to occur in the Black population? We know that across the world, access to healthcare can be different, and that is usually related to socioeconomic factors, but there are also other unidentified factors, and some of groups across the world have tried to look at this, and this is a study that was actually in the British Medical Journal back in 2015, and they asked different ethnic groups to answer these questions about why they chose to have investigations and why they declined investigations. And you'll see that in the populations here, most people wanted to make sure that their cancer was found early, but it's still only 45% of them, whereas the other half wanted to have peace of mind. But in the populations that declined investigations, it was because they thought that their risks were very low, i.e. they weren't high. And this is because there's a misconception amongst many men, and it's also in white men, that the risk of prostate cancer is not particularly high when you're young, but that's not true. And then I think importantly in the Black population, what you'll see here is 37% of those people who decline investigations say they would rather not know that they have cancer. So this is almost like putting your head in the sand. And if you equate this to the figures that I showed you earlier on, where we see people are more likely to have prostate cancer and present with a much later diagnosis, then this kind of thought process is not healthy, and we have to be able to change this somehow. There were also asked people questions about what they felt about being diagnosed with prostate cancer and what their long-term thoughts were about their care. These are kind of statements that were made, and from these, what you can see is this is highly cultural. So the culture embedded in some of the communities, especially around spirituality, has a big impact, not only on how people think about their cancer, but probably also about their mindset around whether they should go and see the doctor in the first place. And I think this is one of the biggest things that needs changing. I think it's hard for people like myself to do that. I think people who are on this call today are the right people to be able to make these changes. So to summarize, what we do know is that in African and Caribbean people, prostate cancer is more likely. It's also more likely to be advanced. Hence, it's more likely that you will pass away of it. And we're not entirely sure why this is, but we have identified some reasons around access. And as I said at the beginning of this talk, I think over the next 3 months, we will see some information coming out of the National Prostate Cancer Audit that specifically looks at the racial differences. And like I say, there will be no surprise as to what that shows. But I think, well, what I hope it will do is it will open the eyes of some of our politicians that will hopefully result in some changes. So for those men and actually for women as well, so if you have partners and husbands, this is all very important. So how do people present when they have prostate cancer? If you have early disease, you may have no symptoms whatsoever, which is why I still think it's important that if you're in a high-risk population, that you do go and seek the opinion of your general practitioner or a specialist. And I would recommend that's around the age of 40, 45 in the population we're talking about. We also know that if you start to have problems passing your urine, for example, if you're going more frequently, if your flow is slower, if you get up more at night, then these are the signs that you need to go and see your GP. We also know that if you start to develop problems with your erections, that can also be a sign that there is prostate cancer present. For those that present much later, and usually this is because they've been ignoring their symptoms, then they can start to develop problems with pain in their bones, worsening urinary symptoms, loss of weight, and difficulty with getting out and about. And I know that some of these things can occur because of other diseases, but then there's more reason for people to visit their doctors if they have any of these symptoms. And I would prefer that if you had any of these, that's the best time to go. So what do we do to try and diagnose prostate cancer? First of all is a blood test, which can be done at the GP. And now, which is the most commonest thing, having the examination of the back passage is not always done up front. We now proceed to something called an MR scan, which gives us intricate images of the inside of your prostate. And this has moved on in leaps and bounds, even in the last 3 years since I last gave this talk, actually. We now have something called a PIRAD system, which predicts the chances of a patient having significant prostate cancer. And based on that scan, we can then decide whether a person needs to have more invasive tests or examinations done. And this has changed the face of prostate cancer diagnostics across the whole of the globe, actually. If you do proceed to a biopsy, then usually it takes about 15 minutes to do. It means having a scanner, which is about the thickness of an adult thumb that is passed into the back passage. And then we take biopsies through a needle that goes through the skin just here. So how do we detect this early? The most important thing here is about education and us being vigilant. It's important that you see your GP purely just for the blood test. You know, if it comes back normal, then that's great. If it comes back abnormal, then you have time to think, and then you need to consider whether you should go and see a specialist. But obviously, as a urologist myself, I would say that you should have no hesitation in doing any of these. But I think it is important as a community for you to talk about this. You know, for men that have already been through the diagnosis are the biggest advocates here, especially in the Black community, or in any community actually, to talk to their colleagues in the community centres, to their friends, and for them to pass it on to say, you know, it's not so bad to have a blood test, it's not so bad having a scan, it's not so bad having a biopsy, because at the end of the day, it saves your lives. And actually, most people, when they're diagnosed, already have families, they have children. So, you know, to find these things early and to have them treated and cured is only the right thing to be doing. And we had a prostate cancer risk management program, which actually Prostate Cancer UK helped with, which has been running since 2016. And much of this was about increasing awareness in high-risk communities. I think, and you know, the next speaker may have a different opinion on this, but I don't think it did what it was supposed to do. I honestly believe that you know, a good example is that all the people that are on this call today probably know most of this already, and it's the people that are not on this call and listening to me are the ones that we have to worry about. And I'm not sure how we go about doing that. So what can everybody do to help prevent it? It means eating healthily, and 5 fruit and vegetables a day, not to eat too much red meat, try and eat fish and maybe skinless chicken. Try not to smoke, control your weight and keep your waist down. And also, I think what is important, I mean, I have a lot of ethnic minority patients. I work in South Manchester, and it's very difficult, especially in the more elderly population, to get them to even take their regular medication. I think this is where the younger population who maybe understand more need to help to ensure that older people move in the right direction. And again, I will not be able to reiterate this enough, and I'm sure that the next speaker will say the same. It is not a big thing to have a blood test done. And me and Charles have had discussions before about whether we can line people up in the churches to have PSA blood tests done. You know, the Royal British Legion does this in various parts of the city. And we know when it happens because we suddenly get an influx of white people with raised PSAs, and we ask them, how did you come about having this? They say, well, I went to the Royal British Legion and that's why I had it done. So that is one way around this. So I think I've probably said enough. I'm hoping that most of my comments are echoes in people's minds, and that they take this forward. And you know, I'm still here. I'm happy to work continuously with Khan to make things better for people. But I do think, and Charles knows this, that we need politicians on our side to make changes. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, VJ. You know, we're really grateful for that. So I think what we're going to do is hear from Liebe, and then we can spend a fair amount of time taking questions. Is that okay for you, VJ?
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we will go over to Liebe now.
Okay, well, thank you. I think what you're going to hear quite a few repetition, but it's good that it is repeated, so maybe it may sink in more. So my name is Liebe Hughes. I'm a volunteer speaker for Prostate Cancer UK, and today what I propose to do is to just do a brief overview of what you need to know about your prostate. But I think you've got the weight of the presentation already by our doctor. Prostate Cancer UK has been very busy in raising awareness, and so you will find us wherever men or women gather together. So, for example, you will find us at football grounds, you will find us cricket ground, golf tournaments, rugby pitches, the building site, social clubs, churches, colleges, universities, and even hospitals, in terms of spreading the word, in terms of raising awareness. Prostate Cancer UK now have hubs across the UK, and so the hub in the Northwest is based in Wigan, and I sort of work from that hub in terms of serving the Northwest in raising awareness. Prior to COVID, we were very busy. Sometimes I was doing 5 or maybe 6 presentations per day. That's how busy we were. So people are getting used to hearing about prostate cancer. I've also done some work with Macmillan in terms of working with some of their groups, again, to raise awareness. So I'm going to give you some basic These are not to frighten you, but to make you aware of the magnitude of what we are trying to deal with prostate cancer. So already you know that prostate cancer is the most common cancer in men. We are losing, as we're speaking, the numbers are rising. So about 47,000 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer each year. That's 139 men every day. Which means then that every 45 minutes, a male will die from prostate cancer. And we are losing approximately 11,000 men per year. That's how devastating this cancer is amongst men. Now, from white male, 1 in 8 will get prostate cancer in their lifetime. However, if you're a black male, your risk doubles, so it's 1 in 4. That's a significant increase in terms of getting prostate cancer. Say a little bit more about that maybe later on. The figures I'm giving you here are all UK-based figures. So we are living with around 400,000 men that are living with prostate cancer or have survived prostate cancer. So what I would say at this stage is that having prostate cancer is not necessarily a death sentence, okay? You've heard earlier from the presentation previously that if it's caught early, then your recovery rate is quite good, okay? But those are just some facts and figures that sort of help you to see the magnitude of what we are trying to work with. Just want to look at the incident rate, maybe slightly different from what the previous speaker talked to you about. But for a white male, the incident rate is 96 to 99.9. You might as well call it 100 per 100,000. However, for if you're Asian, it's 28.7, rising to 60.6 per 100,000. Double whammy. If you're a black person, it goes from 120.8 to 247.9 per 100,000. And that's why we are working so hard to try and raise the awareness, and particularly among ethnic groups and black groups in particular. So those figures are quite high, okay? So who has a prostate? We would say men, and that's where we would normally leave it. But there are some diversity in terms of how how we classify ourselves. And so there are other types of people that can have prostate cancer, and I'll go through those groups with you. So we have trans women that can also have prostate cancer because when they had their genital reconstruction surgery, the prostate is not removed. So therefore they can still have or get prostate cancer. We also have the non-binary people that can also have prostate cancer. Again, if the prostate is intact, you can have prostate cancer. And the final group in that is same-sex people. You know, some people are born with both sexes when they're born, so they're assigned male or female. Again, if the prostate is intact, they can also have prostate cancer. Well, you already know what the prostate is. It is a gland, usually the size of a walnut or thereabout. So I'm not going to say much more about that. But where it, knowing your prostate, and normally when I do the live presentation, where is it? And you would see people's eyes looking to the floor rather than giving me any eye contact at all. And it'd be surprising to know that how many people don't actually know where the prostate is. All right, so already from the previous presentation, you see and know where it is. It's this roundabout here. You have the urethra that goes through that, which allow us to pass urine. What does it do? So what is its function? The prostate main job is to make semen, which the fluid that carries sperm. That's its main function. What can go wrong with it? Well, you can have an enlarged prostate. And as I already stated, that as we grow older as men, it's a natural growth in the prostate. So as we grow older, it gets larger. And as it gets larger, what happens is that the urethra that goes through the prostate gland, like a hose pipe, if you were to get a hose pipe and you were to squeeze it, you would slow the flow down, all right? So then you put back pressure on the bladder. Another thing that can happen with the prostate is that we can have prostatitis, which is an infection, can be an infection in the bladder, or you can have infection in the urethra that can cause that. Now, none of these are cancerous, okay? The enlarged prostate is normally benign. With the prostatitis, if it is determined that it is prostatitis, a course of antibio would normally take care of that. And then you can then develop prostate cancer. The doctor's gone through that with you, so I'm not going to go over that again. But those are the three main things that can happen with the prostate gland. Now, signs and symptoms or not. Again, the urinary problems, and the doctors talked about some of those, but you may find that you may go to the toilet as men, and there's a long wait before you can pass water, or there may be stop and start, or you may feel that you're finished, you walk away, and then you have an accident because the bladder is not quite empty. Okay, now I want to emphasize this more strongly. Most men with early prostate cancer do not have any symptoms, and I'll say a little bit more about that later because I want to link it with the PSA. All right, so that's something to remember, that most men with early prostate cancer do not have any symptoms or known symptoms. Just want to look at some testimony. I know I'm going to have to speed this up. from some of our Black professionals that are helping us at Prostate Cancer to try and spread the message. So I hope you can hear this.
When I hear that 1 in 4 black men are likely to get prostate cancer and 1 in 8 amongst the wider community, it's quite shocking. But I keep telling people, I keep telling my friends that, you know, if we get it checked early, you can overcome it, you know. You are really stronger knowing more.
My experience of prostate cancer was that my friend and my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and they gave me a call and they said to me, I need to go and check out myself. So I went to my doctors, and my doctor, I explained to him I had no symptoms whatsoever. But he says, because your dad's got it, you're more at risk. I think a lot of black men ignore prostate cancer because sometimes it's their pride. And secondly, sometimes it's their fear of finding out.
Prostate cancer in my family, and I suppose around my circle, is never really discussed, to be honest with you. I think it's one of these taboo subjects that a lot of black people don't really want to talk about.
The guy that's self-conscious about going to the doctor is going to be the loudest guy in the pub. Well, the advice I'd give to anyone with concerns about prostate cancer is to visit Prostate Cancer UK website. Go and have a chat with your doctor. It's no different to chatting to anyone else, you know. And just remember, education is the key. 1 in 4, stronger knowing more.
Okay, so there you have some testimonies of some of our sports people and actors that are helping us to spread the message in prostate cancer UK. So know your risk. Who's at risk? I mean, you've covered some of that, but I'll just go through it again just to reinforce it. So all men are at risk. Black and Afro-Caribbean are twice at risk. Age, depending on your age, the risk increase, as you see from the graph that was shown before. As you get older, it rises. Your risk rises. Family history. I know I couldn't add that because I want to really emphasize this. It's important that we know our family history, and it's important that we let others know that something is going on with us. I want to tell you a story, which I think is a very sad story. 2 brothers. One brother went to see his GP, got checked, and it came back that he had prostate cancer. Being a loving brother and a caring brother, he decided that he would then speak to the other brother to say that he's gone to his GP, been tested for prostate cancer, and he came back as positive of having prostate cancer. The other brother turned to him and said, well, I was diagnosed 18 months ago. Now, the thing is, he never spoke to his brother. Had he had taken the time to speak to his brother, he could have saved. I'm not saying that he probably wouldn't have got prostate cancer, but he would have been caught much 18 months earlier. And that's why it's important that we talk about our family histories, that we need to know whether or not my dad, my uncle, my brother, my cousin has had prostate cancer. Because if we don't know our family history, then we could be at risk and don't know it. Now, if your father and your brother have had prostate cancer, it increases your risk 2.5 times. Right? So if your father and your brother have had prostate cancer, it increases your risk 2.5 times. Also, if your mother and your sister had breast cancer before the age of 60, it also increases your risk, right? But those are some things to remember. That's why it's important that we talk to our families about some of the illnesses or disease that they are around for us. So I just want to emphasize the fact that we need to know or speak about our family history. So know your rights. So by the age of 50 plus, that's what the text say, but we are seeing people 40 and even earlier than 40 that are having prostate cancer. So if you're having any of the indicators that both of us have talked about, then it's time for you to go and see your GP. For a Black person, again, 45, 40, you need to go to your GP. Now, sadly, we're getting some feedback that some GPs are refusing to do a PSA test simply because they say it is not a reliable test. And that may well be the case, but it's an indicator if PSAs rise that further investigation may need to be done. So what I say to men is never take no for an answer when you go and ask for a PSA test to be done. And if your GP refuses to give you a PSA test, if you ring Prostate Cancer UK and speak to our specialist nurse, they will advise you how to have or get your PSA test done. So it's just a blood test. That's all it is. When you ask for a blood test, normally there's a form that comes with the canister that contains the blood, and all they do is tick a tick box to say check for PSA in the blood, okay? And that's what happens. So PSA is just prostate specific antigen. It's a protein that grows develop in the prostate as the prostate grows. So the larger the prostate comes in, more of that antigen protein that is produced, that then spill over into your bloodstream. And so that's why it can be detected in a blood test. You need to motor on from here. So, but again, I can't underscore enough that you have your blood test done. Let's skip that one. So what action can we take? How do we need to take? I'm trying to close this up. So we need to speak to your GP. That's already been re-emphasized and re-emphasized. You need to speak to your GP. Speak to your father, brother, cousin, uncle, whoever, family members, to find out whether or not it is in the family. So it can be hereditary. So awareness equals early diagnosis, and early diagnosis equals survival. All right. So again, the number for our specialist nurse is on the screen. So you ring prostate cancer on that number 0800 074 8383, and you can ask to speak with one of our specialist nurses. Just wanted to listen to this, and then I think I'm coming towards the end of my presentation.
My specific research interest is in prostate cancer in African American men. I see the African American disparity in prostate cancer incidence and mortality as a window to the epidemic of prostate cancer globally among men of African origin. The issue of looking at prostate cancer on a global scale is very fascinating. You look at African American men in the United States and African men born of African origin on another continent separated by several miles, and they do have the same common problem. And we are seeing very stark similarities between the tumor biology of African American men and those on the African continent. The Respond Initiative is really an initiative that is in partnership with the Prostate Cancer Foundation and the NCI as a national campaign, really, looking at linking epidemiologic risk factors, including stress and environmental exposures, to the biology of prostate cancer, together to really solve the problem of prostate cancer health disparities nationwide. And it's really a multi-institutional study for which Murphy Cancer Center is participating, and I'm very happy to be one of the investigators on this study. The important thing is to know that if there is an increased risk in the population of patients, then regulations such as when to have a first PSA testing done, or if you have a family member who had prostate cancer at a younger age, what to do about that. I mean, these are basic fundamental questions that the community, the African American community, need to be aware of, because we can come up with all the treatments that we have, which is great, but if we don't address why more of these patients are getting the disease in the first place and why they are being diagnosed later, in a later stage, I think the disparity will remain. So there is first awareness to allow African American men to get engaged in the issue early on, but it's also a question of the scientists being able to say, if I'm designing a study, I need to design it so that I can engage the African American community to participate in that study. So it becomes a multi-pronged solution. I think that's the only way we can address the problem. I don't think it's fair to the patient to say, well, I can't help you now, but maybe 10 years later I will. I believe that we need to accelerate our work, and that's a unique strength of the Prostate Cancer Foundation.
Right, so there are some real encouraging things that we have people that are working specifically to look at the disparity between with prostate cancer. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment as I talk to you a little bit about some of the resources that Prostate Cancer UK has. If you go on our website, there's a whole wealth of information to look through. So what I would encourage you to do is to go and have a look at the website. There are information there that would help us. We have things like these Z cards, and if you can see that very well, they open up very easily like a credit card, so you can just pass to somebody to raise their awareness about prostate cancer. We do some material specifically for Black men. Again, it's a Z card which opens up and it's very easy to put in your wallet or put into your pocket. So there are those type of stuff. We also do a booklet specifically for Black men, and it's all the information there to help. These are written specifically for men. We also have leaflets on terms of, I don't know if you can see that very well, the prostate, how it works, function, and what you need to do. It tells you all about what happens if you need to have a prostate. There's a whole, like I said, there's a whole wealth of information that is on the website. You can also download some of the material from the website. Support in terms of supporting somebody that has just been diagnosed. All that information is on the website. So I encourage you to take a look. Again, if anybody would want some material, we can, or I can provide material for people if they're so required. Just share my screen again, and then I'm out of. I can continue with the program. So let's so today we've looked at some of the basic facts about prostate cancer. Who has a prostate? So you should know your prostate a bit better now. They should be aware of some of the signs or symptoms. You should know who's at risk and what you need to do about the risk. You should know your rights. Again, I will reiterate, do not take no for an answer regarding PSA tests, and also take action. So the action we need to take is to, again, speak to our GP and speak to our family and friends, and speak to somebody. You know, what I find particularly interesting about men is that when we sit to talk, we'll talk about cricket, we'll talk about football, we'll talk about women, but we never talk about the things that really are impacting us in terms of our health. So we need to change. We need to change that mentality. So there's just one final message I want to leave with you as I close this out.
Men don't talk about cancer. It's not the manly thing to do. Well, I'm here to tell you, it is the manly thing to do. Don't be dumb. Talk about it.
And that is the message that we want to give, that we need to be able to talk. We need to be able to talk about this in a very meaningful way. And so the message that Samuel Jackson is just giving us is precisely what we need to. We need to talk about it. Talk to each other. Talk to everybody that you can get. It's also a good idea to carry some of these leaflets in your pocket that you can just hand to somebody that they might be in a hurry. So I think that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thanks very much, Liebert.
There are any questions, then either of us will field those, I guess.
Thanks very much, Liebert. I mean, someone has asked for the prostate cancer number, so if you can put that in the chat box. But we have a couple of questions. So Vijay, could you turn your camera on, please? So there are a couple of questions in here. So exactly what is there in the black genes that make us more prone to prostate cancer?
So that's an interesting scientific question, isn't it? I don't think it's right to say the black genes. I don't think there's something in the ethnic group itself that does it. I think we all share 99% of our genes, regardless of our color. Yeah? The difference is how the prostate cancer develops in different populations. And there is a study that only came out a few weeks ago, actually, from the US. It's one of the biggest studies globally. They looked at about 600 people, so 600 black men from different parts of America, and looked at the genetic profile and compared it to a European white population. And what they found is that they were really looking at drug markers. And so most of the genes within the prostate cancers from both of those groups were similar to the current drugs that we have. So the drugs that we have will work similar regardless of what ethnic group you come from. But what's important is that they found 3 or 4 genes that were present in the black population's prostate cancers that weren't so present in the white population. And a couple of those are things like MYC gene and something called ETB4. But at the moment, there are no drugs that act on those specific markers. But you know, medicine has changed so much, even in my lifetime, that there probably will be over the next few years. I don't think they're genes that are black genes. That's just the genes that everybody has, but they're more upregulated in prostate cancers from black populations. Does that help answer the question?
Thanks. And please, when you've asked a question and you're given a response. If there's a comeback question, please pop it in there or use the raise hand feature. So someone had said, apologies for joining late, but what are the indicators that a man may have prostate, i.e. the symptoms to watch out for?
Do you want me to answer? To get Liebert to answer it?
Okay, I mean, what we are saying is that you may find that you may be getting up more regular day or night. You may be going to the toilet to wee day or night more regular than you would normally do. You may find sometimes you may have burning in terms of your urination. That again doesn't mean that you have prostate cancer. It just means that there may be an infection that may be causing that to happen. But at least you can then start the ball rolling and ruling things out. If you're having hesitancy when you go to the toilet, or if you're finding that you can't go very long without having to go to the toilet, I remember, because how I come into this is that 10 years ago, I had found that my PSA level went up to 56. And when they've done the biopsies and all of that, it came back that it was benign, which I was very pleased about. So I was very pleased that for that. But because we may have the symptoms, doesn't necessarily mean that it's prostate cancer. That's what we're trying to say to you. So that's why it's important that you go and speak with your GP. They will do a blood test, a urine test, blood test. They will do a biopsy if they need to do a biopsy, or a MRI scan if they need to do that, to try and find out whether or not the growth in the prostate is benign or cancerous.
So, Vijay, anything to add?
No, I think that's pretty succinct, actually. The only thing I would say is that I know one of the things that people dislike the most is the rectal examination and the biopsy. So that's why I want to emphasize that a blood test and a scan are two things that you can have, which are, I would say, not too invasive. And then once you have them, it will help you make the right decision.
Okay, so another question, Vijay, about could diet help prevent occurrence of prostate cancer at all?
So I think there's lots of good evidence around the whole of the world that says that diet can affect all sorts of cancers, and it can also affect your general kind of health. So it is about having 5 fruits and vegetables a day. It is about not eating too much red meat. Red meat should be a treat, not a regular occurrence. You should be eating fatty fish like mackerel and sardines and salmon, and you should eat preferably skinless chicken so there's less fat on it. And I'll go back to my statement about big bellies. And as I've got older, Charles, I know that even I look down and I see that I'm starting to get a belly bigger than what it was a couple of years ago. So we all have to be mindful of it, but you can have a normal weight and still have a big belly. So the size of your belly is really important. That is related to your diet. So if you find that the waist measurement at your belly button is greater than 39 inches, then it means you need to change what you're eating and you need to be more active. So exercise will help as well. But there's nothing particular that's related to the black population. This is something that's for all of us.
Thanks, Vijay. There is another question.
Yeah.
I know, Lee, but you've mentioned, calling the prostate cancer nurse, who can provide some advice. But I think, since we're in Greater Manchester, Vijay, I'm wondering if there's anything we could do locally, because there's a question in there from Tolu saying GPs in Stockport are reluctant to carry out PSA tests because it's not a priority and because not many Black people live in there.
So first of all, I think that's a really inappropriate answer from the GP. And I think, as Liebert said, if you can get hold of those cards that tell you about prostate cancer for Black men, you take it and you put it on the GP's desk and you say to them, this is why I want to have my PSA done. They're the first things that people can do themselves. The second thing is, this is about our rights as patients. So I'm a patient as well. I'm not just a doctor. So we all have our rights. So it is your right to go to your GP and to ask for that PSA, and it is your right to be able to have it. So if someone's denying you that, then that is not good, and you must vocalize it and stand up for yourselves. The other thing I think, as I mentioned in my talk, Charles, is, and to everyone, is that, you know, in white populations, the Royal British Legion puts on regular events across the country, actually, where men will queue up and have a PSA done. And I just wonder whether there's capacity to do that within your community. And if there was, then I'd be more than happy to help.
I think there is. I know that some organization organize for the PSA test to be done within the organizational structure. So it is possible to do that. So what I would also say to that person is that you have the right to a second opinion as well.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Lee. But and you know, this goes back to the rights of all of us, doesn't it? You know, we all have a right to a good, healthy life. And if someone is denying that to you by not giving you a PSA blood test.
So I think VJ, we will take up that offer, and we will work with yourself to make that happen. So another one, I appreciate the hereditary aspect, but it's a challenge that there are such high rates of prostate cancer, food related. And then someone also saying, I asked my GP for the test, she sidestepped my request and told me they only do the physical test. I believe the reason behind that is the test cost, and the testing, you know, physical testing and the surgeries are all about cost cutting.
So first thing, I think I answered the question about diet. I think, you know, prostate cancer is related to bad diet, but this is not, you can't change it in 2 months. It's something that we have to instill in our children. You know, we have to make sure they have a healthy diet from the start. Although I do say it's never too late to change, but I think once you've got prostate cancer, I don't think a massive change in your diet is going to make any difference, and the evidence would suggest that. But it's good to make that change at any point in your life. But it is about teaching our children right from the beginning as to what they should be eating.
Yes, it's more the prevention.
Yeah.
When I do this presentation in churches, I do a second part, which is looking at what we can eat in order to maintain good prostate health.
Absolutely. And with regards to the second question, which is about the cost, PSA blood test costs less than £6. So it's not a cost issue. And a rectal examination is not good enough. So you know, that you can tell your GP that you know it costs less than £6. So that's one way around it.
Okay, Vijay, there's another question. I was diagnosed 8 years ago with an enlarged prostate and go for annual PSA test. How long can I take the medication for before it becomes ineffective?
It depends on what medication you're taking, and I think it's probably a bit private to be discussing that with so many people online. There's 70 people here, but if people are taking medication for enlarged prostate and they have problems passing urine, then things like tamsulosin and finasteride can work for many, many years. And everybody is different. And the thing to watch out for is the deterioration in your symptoms. So if you start to find that you're going back to where you were, it's the time to go to the GP or to the specialist and to think about other types of treatment.
Just something we haven't, I don't think we have said in terms of what can cause the PSA to raise. So if you're due to go for a PSA blood test, it'd be wise to make sure you're not having any sex that you're not exercising heavily before you go for the test, and also that you're not riding a bike, because all those things would massage the prostate, and so it then produce more antigen. So that's something to be mindful of. If you're going for it, just make sure that you're not engaging in any of these things prior to going for your tests.
Right. In both those setting, there are very few black men, and any health issues aren't high on the agenda. So I think BJ goes back to the lobbying bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and once again about food and genes, but I believe you've touched on that. Is it just me, or is it the very thought of the methodology of the physical testing that puts off black men, knowing there's a stigma about being penetrated in that area?
But do you want to
Yeah, I mean, I would attest to that, and I think that we as black people, in any case, are private people, so we don't want to be violated or feel like we've been violated in any way. But has been said that the DRE is not the only method of checking for prostate cancer.
So Vijay, there's a question about, can the CCGs do anything? How can we have them raise the profile of the prostate testing with GPs?
So I would go back to Ebert's and my presentation. We both spoke about Prostate Cancer UK's campaign, which started in 2016, actually. And I think, for people to get their GPs to listen to them, for people to get their brothers, their fathers, their husbands to listen to them, get hold of that card and put it in front of their faces and say, this is why you need to have your blood test undertaken. And from a CCG perspective, I think it's, again, it boils down to politics, isn't it? And that's where people like Khan, I think, come into power, because you have the contacts and you have the means to maneuver at least this city into a reasonable direction. And you have people like myself and the Christie that can help you do that as well.
I think Lesman has a question. Okay,
just before Lesman, maybe, because just Prostate Cancer UK wants to work locally with its communities, and that's part of my role to make connection with the BME community. So again, we can provide resources, we can do talks, we can do stands. So if for argument's sake there was a gathering of black people, where it would be appropriate to do a talk, or maybe a talk on a stand, or a stand or a talk, then that's what I'm here to do.
So Lesmond, any comeback on that?
Yeah, it was just really to follow up on the question before regarding the pressures on the CCGs. So what I'm saying is, if this is such an issue, why aren't the CCG, like with other things, why aren't they seeing this as a high profile situation that needs to be dealt with? It just is quite interesting that, for the black population, they'll do things for other populations, specifics. Why can't they do that for our population? I really appreciate the fact that Cancer UK are doing something, but I think that there are other additional things that can be done.
Thanks, Lesmond. I'm already tweeting.
Zoom call.
I'm already tweeting to that effect, saying we will be asking questions, and I know it's something that VJ has been supportive, and we've had conversation with Afzal Khan already. So we need to take some action now. There's a question about, is it a myth that evacuation reduces prostate cancer, VJ?
Yes, it's a myth. It's a myth.
Okay. Okay. When someone has symptoms or is diagnosed with cancer, what is your first point of action towards healing? What would you advise?
Sorry, can you just repeat that? I'm trying to read where it is.
Okay. When someone has the symptoms or is diagnosed with cancer, what is your first point of action, towards healing? That's the word you use. What would
Yeah,
you advise?
I think the first part of this is helping people understand what their diagnosis is. And prostate cancer is quite a vast, it's a spectrum of disease. It can be very early, and sometimes we don't treat people straight away, and then it can be very advanced. So discussion that we have with people is very dependent on where they are in that spectrum. I think what's important is once we've helped them understand, we then have to help them understand how we're going to help them to get rid of the cancer and treat it if it needs to be treated. And we do have a system in place, and it should be in every hospital and in every clinic, where you get seen by multiple specialists who can give you the opinion, but you also have an attached clinical nurse specialist who should be giving you the right patient information, who should be there to not just discuss things with you when you're there in person, but also be a contact on the telephone or by email. Because a lot of the time, when you get a diagnosis, what things go in one ear and out of the other because you're very confused and you're scared. And what we usually say to people is, go home. You have to discuss it with your family and people that are close to you, because they are the ones that are going to give you support. If you have questions, you then must contact your clinical nurse specialist team, because that's what they are there for. And that is what they get paid to do. In Greater Manchester, every single hospital, I know that because I know them all, has at least 3 of these nurses working with them. So that's what the availability is. And I think that, if the community speaks to each other, and, there are lots of people like Lee Button, there's clinical nurse specialists from various ethnic backgrounds that can help. There's the churches that have good community centres, and I think they are something that is a really great resource. But the bottom line here is, if people are not going to talk about it, it's difficult to help them.
I think it's also a good idea that if you're going for a result of your diagnosis, that you take somebody with you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have about 19 more questions or comments. Will black seed oil help reduce the risk? Africans swear by it, and some have success stories. So VJ, black seed oil.
So I don't know of any trials or medical data that would tell us whether black seed oil is effective or not.
Okay, and VJ, is there any research in the UK with black men? And are people coming forward to take part in any study?
There's no specific studies at this moment in time.
Right. Okay. The check for appendectomy is via the same route, and it's very embarrassing and uncomfortable. Does anyone has or had reservations about the check? So that's, someone asking that question.
Charles, this goes back to the check with the finger in the back passage is a very small part of this. You don't have to have that. If you don't want to, you can just have the blood test and the MR scan and then a biopsy. Yeah? But when you have the biopsy, you will need to have a scan device put into the back passage.
So sadly, there's another question here. Is it a population reduction tactic for Black people?
No, I don't think. I don't think that's the case at all. I go back to, given what's happened globally over the last 4 to 5 months with Black Lives Matter, this is about your rights. Yeah, so I think it's about educating yourself. It's about standing up for yourselves. It's about when you go to the GP who says, no, you can't have a PSA, you have to be able to have the energy to put your fist on the table and say, no, it's my right, I want it done. And demand a letter saying why you can't have it from the GP.
So someone has said, it's important to have education and testing. And then another question, what is the normal PSA range?
So, I think the testing we don't have a national program at all at the moment that invites people. So this is about people listening to what myself and Liba are saying and taking the initiative to go and have the test done themselves. When it comes, sorry, what was the second question?
It's asking about the normal PSA range.
The normal PSA range, it depends on your age. So very simplified. If you're in your 40s, it should be less than 2.5. If you're in your 50s, it's less than 3.5. If you're in your 60s, it's less than 4.5. And then 70 and above, it's usually kind of less than 6.5. But if people are in their 90s, we tend not to worry too much unless it's in double figures.
Okay. As a researcher on prostate cancer in Black men, the men I interviewed indicated that they were fearful of the side effects of prostate cancer. What can one say to reassure these Black men about the consequences of prostate cancer?
So the side effects of prostate cancer, usually the commonest ones are problems passing your urine or problems with your sexual function. And in both of those, especially in this day and age, there is help at hand. So if you are having problems with incontinence, most of the time that can be dealt with by doing pelvic floor exercises, which we have physiotherapists in place to help teach you. If it's very severe, then there are operations that you can have to counter that. And when it comes to sexual functioning, there are tablets, there are creams, there are lotions, there are injections, all of which can be effective for sexual functioning. And then ultimately, there are also things like penile implants where we reconstruct it so patients can have sexual functioning. But the latter one is not a common operation. So I think to reassure them, what we would say is that yes, you probably will have some side effects, but if you tell us what those side effects are, then we can help you overcome. It's a bit like being scared of spiders, isn't it? So if you're scared of spiders, you don't want to see them, but if you tell someone you're scared of them, they can help you overcome that fear so that you can then deal with it.
Anything to add, Liba?
Yeah, I think agreeing with what's been said, side effects that you can have depending on the type of operation that you might have. Even with having the TURP operation, you can have side effects like, again, the urinary ones, and then there are supports that you can get for that. You can also have what they call erectile function, no. Retrograde ejaculation. So not only does the prostate act as a gland, it also acts as a valve. It has two seminal tubes that fits into the back of it. So it determines whether or not you want to pass urine or whether or not you want to ejaculate. Sometimes when they do those operations, some of the nerves get damaged, and so the muscle don't work quite as well. But then the doctor says there are support that they can have for it. There's some treatments that can be had for those.
Okay. So someone is saying the prostate cancer statistics in the Caribbean are comparable to that of Caribbean and African men in the UK. DJ, any comment on that?
I think globally, the statistics are the same,
Right.
regardless of where you're actually living.
Okay, what is the first action of actual treatment for the patient? Do doctors offer any alternative treatment like herbs that can cleanse the blood from mucus and toxins, therefore cleansing the body? VJ?
The first action of treatment is variable, so it depends on what stage your cancer is and what risk group you're in. So that's a very big question. I think, but to answer it very briefly, the first stage of management is, like I said, is understanding, reassurance, and then discussing in depth of what each of the treatments are. And they are usually either to have your prostate removed or to have radiation to the prostate. That's if you've got a curative disease. If you have disease that's already spread, then there's no cure for that. But what we do give is injections to shrink the prostate cancer cells so that the blood test becomes normal again. And that can work for variable amounts of time, usually 2 to 3 years. But what you have is a regular check of your PSA, and if it starts going up, then there are other treatments that we can give, which are usually in the form of tablets. When it comes to things like herbal remedies, I have no objection to people using them, but they should be used alongside your standard treatments that we know work. But we also have to be mindful that there may be interactions which we don't know about. So whilst it's not a huge problem, I think it's important that you do discuss it with your doctor if that's the stance you want to take. But I would urge people not to use them on their own because it's unlikely that they will help you.
And they tend to be more preventative. They're more effective if they're more preventative. So it's something that you're doing as a lifestyle thing to ensure good prostate health.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Liebert, actually, because to take supplements like vitamins and minerals and things is really good for you, but it's not going to take a cancer away. It might stop it from coming, but it's the long game, isn't it? It's not these kind of things aren't going to help you in a week. You have to start from an early age.
Right, there's another one. My doctor is not keen to carry out a test on me. She eventually did a blood test and told me it's okay. I do not need a further test, which is intrusive. Shall I take her word or ask for any further test, even if the blood test did not indicate any problem? I'm in my mid-50s.
So I think if the blood test is in the normal range for a 50-year-old, which is less than 3.5, then that's absolutely fine for the time being. But what I would say is that if you develop any urinary symptoms or problems with your erections or new bone pain that's unexplainable, then it's worthwhile reapproaching the GP for another test. I also think it's reasonable to ask for a test at least every 2 or 3 years, just to help you keep yourself reassured.
To add to that, what I would say is that
I think every year is too much.
Yeah, to add to that, what I would say is that ask for your score. Keep a log of your score, because you may ring up and they say, well, your score is fine, but it may be towards the top end, where maybe beforehand it was below towards the bottom end. So you can't track what's happening with that. So always ask for your score. Don't just accept the fact that, oh, it's fine, it's within range.
Okay, VJ, another question for you. If you have enlarged prostate but was negative, how often should you have the prostate or test if you have a family history of prostate cancer?
I think in that case, you should have it done at least annually.
Right, okay. And a friend of mine did the PSA test and the results read 4.92. What is the implication about this? In the meantime, he's urinating more than usual and feel pains when he's urinating.
That depends on the age. So I think the first thing I would say, regardless of age, you need to see a specialist.
Okay. So my test was suspended due to COVID. I'm yet to be contacted by the hospital. What should I do?
I would call, if you've got a letter, I would call the hospital and ask them what's happening.
Yeah, they are still doing blood tests, but you have to ring and they'll make an appointment for them to do that test. Most GPs are not doing blood tests at the moment.
Which hospital is that? Can I ask?
MRI.
MRI. Okay, so you should quite easily be able to phone the secretarial team and ask them to put a blood test request in for you, and then you can just nip into the hospital and have that test. But obviously, make sure that you keep your social distancing and wear a mask.
So 2 more questions, VJ. What's the wait time for all this from GP to getting all the screening? And it's important that Black men are not fobbed off or delayed because we don't understand the system.
So usually, if you go to your GP for a blood test, and if you're well and you just want to have a blood test to reassure yourself, you should get the result back within 2 weeks. Okay. If you are having symptoms again and you have a blood test, it should come back within 2 weeks. If the blood test is abnormal, then your GP should refer you as an urgent case. We call them HSC 205, that's the medical term for them. And that means that as soon as the GP has written the letter and sent it, the hospital must give you an appointment within 2 weeks of that letter. And then once you're in the system, you should have all your diagnostic tests done really within 4 weeks.
Okay, thanks, VJ. I mean, talking about hospitals, tomorrow afternoon, we have a collective community response meeting, and we have to associate group, medical directors from Manchester Foundation Trust attending, so we can pick that up with them. But also, we're going to put a helpline in the chat box. I'm a governor at MFT, and we have a partnership, and cancer is one of the work streams. So we'll be happy to pick that up. But also, we know we always have the support of VJ, and Lieber is also around.
I work at MFT as well.
Great. Okay. So a couple of more questions. I know of a lady that has been diagnosed with stage 4 bone cancer, given 4 weeks to live after having months and months of treatment. A friend recommended a herbal drink to her. She's been taking that drink for several months, along with a change of diet, no meat, no dairy, sugar or salt, and she's now been given all clear. Her hair is grown back and all the vitals are back to normal. So that's a comment from, one of the participants. And how would you explain that? She's been taking hundreds of tablets, chemotherapy, lost all her hair, and much more, which didn't work, but the herbal drink did. Could this be something that doctors look into as an alternative and maybe saving more lives? VJ.
I think the first question is you have to be able to prove that that is actually what happened, because sometimes when people have taken chemotherapy drugs, they may not work immediately. So we do know that sometimes 8 weeks down the line from having stopped your treatment, you could still have a full recovery. But if someone feels that that is the case, then they should let their specialist know, maybe take the treatment that they've had along with them, and maybe the consultant can have it tested to actually see what's in it. Because yes, in which case that it would be something that someone could use for other patients.
So VJ, there's a request for you to repeat the symptoms that one should look out for on a daily basis.
So symptoms are usually to do with passing your urine. So if you feel that you have to go to urgently and you can't hold on, if you feel that you get to the toilet and you have to wait before the urine comes out, and if the flow is slower, so good examples, if you take a step back from the toilet, see if you can still get it in. If you can't, it means that your flow is slowed down. If you're having things like blood in your urine, or if it hurts when you pass your urine, then these are all your signs and symptoms. The other one is if your erectile function is starting to become less. You should seek help from your GP.
Liebe, anything to add?
No, I think we've covered, between us, we've covered extensively some of the indicators that we may have. And what I try to get into people's mind is that these are not symptoms of cancer. All right, they are symptoms that mean that something is happening either with the bladder or you have an enlarged prostate. It doesn't necessarily equal cancer. That's why it's important that we have the necessary investigation done.
I think the other thing I would say, Alib, and I'm sure you'll support me, is that you don't want the symptoms to come on, which is why I think in this population, having a PSA at age 40 to 45 is absolutely the right thing to be doing. And because getting the symptoms means that there is potential that it may be too late.
I guess just one final point then is the fact is that, as I've said in the presentation, that early prostate cancer, there are no known symptoms, okay? So if your GP are refusing to give you a test simply because you don't have any symptoms, that is also a no-no.
Okay, so before we run out of time, before we take final closing words from, our wonderful and expert presenters, as Khan, we always like to do the evidence-based bit and then also real stories from the community. So we keep saying we work on two fronts. On the one front, we're working with policy and decision makers. And then on the other front, we're working with the community around self-help, self-care, doing for self. And for those of you who live in Greater Manchester, we've got devolution. So Khan, our role, over the last 3 years has been lobbying, campaigning, influencing, knocking on doors, making sure that the voice of the Black community is heard in decision-making corridors and that we are around the table. So we'll continue doing that. We're lobbying at the moment on sickle cell. We will be picking up the prostate cancer work as well. We started some conversation with Macmillan to make sure that we have a Black cancer worker, to do some of that engagement. So we'll pick up on that. During COVID, there are lots of online activities we've been running. So on Tuesday evenings, we have physical activity and nutrition. So, Dr. Sanga made reference to obesity, and we know there's a new strategy launched. We've given, our support as Khan to that obesity strategy and trying to work with Public Health England because of some of the links with COVID-19. And we'll keep doing that. So on Tuesday evenings, we will have physical activity and nutrition session. On Thursdays, we have our single mothers peer support group. But on Saturday morning, we have health where we bring, medical professionals from our community, to engage and to offer reassurance. We will do something on diabetes. So thanks, for the requests. So we want to keep engaging, we want to keep talking, to the community. Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to have a session. We'll be having, the director of public health from Salford. She's a Black woman. She will be coming to tell us about what the major incident declared in Greater Manchester means. We also have one of the 3 Black African local councillors. So one is in Salford, and Councillor Wilson will be on talking about his experience from being a refugee to now a local councillor, in a ward in Salford. But then also would have 2 medical directors from Manchester Foundation Trust engaging and offering reassurance to our community. So the details for tomorrow's afternoon's meeting is in the chat box. Go on our website, sign up, to our e-bulletins, and we've set up a counseling service offering free counseling service for people who are bereaved, for victims of domestic violence and general mental health anxiety issues. But we're also privileged to be engaging with some of the recovery planning that is happening in Greater Manchester. This Saturday, the Health Hour will focus on mental health. We know it's a big thing. In our own survey, it came out as one of the key, findings So please visit our website, download the report. We're going to go over to, Dr. Sanga for final words, and then Liebert as well.
So I suppose what's my take-home message to everybody? I think given the questions we've had today, it is about know your own body and know your own rights, and go and have a PSA done. That's all. I'll finish with that. Those 3 take-home messages.
I would say that we need to take responsibility and educate ourselves. While trials are being done, while research are being done to try and find out why there is this disparity between a white male and a black male, that's somewhere down the line. And Prostate Cancer UK is also working to lobby the government and also NHS in terms of having specific tests done for men. So we need to educate ourselves. We need to present ourselves to our GP more frequently.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been amazing. We've had probably 70 plus people. So please keep engaging. If you have any issues within, your engagement with services anywhere across Greater Manchester, please don't hesitate to drop us a line, or drop us an email or call the helpline, and we will do our best to help you, challenge the system. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Once again, massive thanks to Dr. Vijay Sanga and Liebert Hughes for all the time you've given and for the engagement and support we continue to receive from yourself. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.